Hello everyone. This week's video is going to be about a mission that we were called upon to perform. However, we never actually got to launch. And what this mission was a fallen angel mission that I've discussed fallen angel missions in previous videos. Just a quick recap of fallen angel mission is a call that goes out to all coalition forces, letting them know that a coalition aircraft is down behind enemy lines outside the wire. It doesn't necessarily have to be for a shoot down. It could be down for mechanical purposes. However, we received multiples of these missions in the year that we were over there, and some turned out good and some turned out not so good. This was a very not so good one. This happened on August 6th, 2011. Today is the 13th anniversary of the ill-fated mission of Extortion 17. Extortion 17 was a Chinook CH-47 helicopter flown by the National Guard, and they were tasked with providing lift for this particular evening for SEAL Team 6, or pieces of SEAL Team 6, parts of, along with some Special Forces operators and JTACS from the Air Force, and also I believe there was also Afghan commandos on there and one U.S. working dog. So we got the Fallen Angel call at about 02:30, 02:45 that morning. And so initially we get medevac, Fallen Angel. And so immediately our heart starts to race and go into full oh crap mode. So we jump in the aircraft, we tune up the frequencies, we get the aircraft up to Redcon 1 meaning that we're at our 100% and we are ready to lift off whenever we get the thumbs up to go. So we were at Redcon 1, we had the frequencies tuned up, and so we were listening to JTAC aircraft, AWAC aircraft and other controlling aircraft in the area, basically giving a rundown of what was happening or what is happening at that time. So the Chinook was coming in for a landing into the Tangni Valley. They were bringing in SEAL Team 6 in support of the Rangers that were currently working in the Tangni Valley at that time. They had multiple troop in contact missions going on currently at that time, and SEAL team was coming in to support. And this National Guard team was tasked with flying them in there, and they had flown multiple missions with these guys in the previous weeks. So they were on short final. Some guy basically used our rules of engagement against us and shot an RPG at the aircraft on short final from a doorway or a window of a building. Our rules of engagement stated that we were not allowed to engage targets that were shooting from doorways and windows because we didn't know what was on the other side. There were some children injured in one of the missions that we had to do, pick up some kids because an Apache smoked a fool in the doorway, and some shrapnel went in and hurt some children. However, they all survived. So this was very hindering for our forces to not do this. And in this situation where you have Apaches flying in support of this Extortion aircraft and essentially watched it unfold, with relatively short time, and couldn't do anything about it. And unfortunately, the RPG hit the slow-moving large aircraft that was on short final to land somewhere in the rear of the aircraft. And if anybody knows how a Chinook works, you got two main rotating rotor heads up above, and as they start to get out of sync, the blades start to impact each other because they intertwine with each other as they rotate in sync. And when they get out of sync, drive shafts break, causing it to get out of sync and whatever else. And basically, it's just total catastrophe after that. The whole aircraft just ate itself up and fell to the ground in a burning mass. So we were listening to all the aircraft, and they were telling us to stand by. They were analyzing the scene with infrared cameras and whatever other available devices that they had. And I can't fully remember how many hours that we were at Redcon 1 ready to go. However, I do remember getting fuel because we sat there for so long with the rotors turning 100% that we actually taxied over to the FARP, the refuel area, and refueled our aircraft, and then went back to our parking spots and waited some more. The aircraft were stacked up. What I mean stacked up, from like 100 feet all the way up to 30,000 feet. You had every aircraft pretty much known to man in the U.S. inventory was flying there. We had probably the lowest flying aircraft was the Apaches, all the way up to F-16s, 15s, B-52s, you name it. AC-130 was circling overhead. They were surveying the scene, and they were also talking to everybody, letting us know what they were seeing. And after a few hours of sitting there at Redcon 1, they finally determined that there was no signs of life. And at that time, they determined that they were going to stand us down, because it was not a rescue mission anymore. It was a recovery mission. So the assault team would be tasked with doing that, probably at first light. A lot of strange things happened with this particular event. There's all kinds of books out there. I've read a couple of them, and I honestly don't know what to believe. A lot of people are saying it's an inside job, that there was the aircraft pieces and parts that they found in the ground. They found bullet holes from the inside of the aircraft out. And that's one of the things I don't necessarily agree with. And some of the investigators claimed that this was the ammunition of the men on board cooking off, but the holes that were exit wounds through the aircraft were not that of cooking off rounds. Cooking off rounds just spin sporadically, and if anything, and they don't go very far either. Regardless of what you see in the movies. So there's theories of the Afghan commandos on board started a scuffle with everyone else on board, and there was gunfire. Like I said, I don't know if this is true, although there is one thing I definitely know is true. Is one of the things I had read is the investigators stated that there was a flash flood that evening, and it washed a lot of the wreckage from the aircraft out. I mean, there are a lot of stream beds, and this was a valley, but we were within less than 10 minutes of this area. It didn't rain. I don't recall any rain, any storms that came through that early morning. So to me, that's very bizarre. However, I don't want to take away from all those that were lost. I just want to remember them. And I guess there's one other thing I want to add to this. I went on R&R in, I believe it was April of 2011, so a few months before this event happened. And one of the other guys going on R&R at the time, he was an Apache pilot. I had never met him before, did not know him. I'd seen him in passing. So we spent a lot of time together. Anybody that went on R&R from over there, it was grueling. Hours and hours of waiting and flying and sitting and waiting in Kuwait. So we had a lot of time together. We really got to know each other and became pretty good friends. He was a very religious man. I won't use his name, as I typically don't. Never cursed. So it was difficult for me to speak to him without cursing. But so the reason why I tell you this is when they stood us down that early morning, it was still dark, and obviously none of us were going to go back to bed like we normally would do. So we basically went back to our operations building, basically where we hung out, went back to our hooches and stuff where we lived. And then when the sun came up, we went out to the aircraft to do post-flight on the aircraft and get it ready for the next day. And on our way out to the aircraft, I ran into my buddy, the Apache pilot. He was on his way in. He just got back. He was pale as a ghost, and he had a 1,000-yard stare. And I walked up to him like, man, how's it going, man? Were you out there? He said, yeah, I was, man. I was. He's like, I watched the whole thing happen, and I wanted to waste the whole fucking village. Pardon my language for this, but by him saying that, you know, it was very profound. You know, the fact that he never cursed, and by him saying this, it really put it into perspective that how real it was. And I was like, I asked him, I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I watched the guy go into the doorway, watch him come out, point the rocket, and pull the trigger. And he couldn't do anything about it. So the rules of engagement were more hindering than they were help. They helped the enemy. That's about all they did help. So terrible. I don't know if you can see it in my face or not, but I'm extremely bitter over the events that happened that night, for more reasons than one. But just, I want to remember them, remember the crew, the Army crew that was flying, and all the SEALs and Air Force operators that were on board. I remember, and Bart the dog. Bart the working dog was also on there. All the Americans that were involved, I want to remember them. In my previous video, I spoke about this mission briefly. And today, I will be walking 31 miles, a mile for each one lost, on August 6, 2011. And I will never forget that night, that morning. And it will always stick with me forever. And it's crazy to even think that it's been 13 years since this event happened. But I'm going to remember them today by doing that walk, 31 miles. So if any of you are interested in doing that, check the link. You can still sign up, even though today is the day that it starts, but you have the entire month of August to do this. I have chosen to do 31 miles in one day. But never forget these guys, Extortion 17. Look it up, read about it, learn. Those of us that were there that night, those of us that were involved that night, I'd love to hear from you. And one more thing before I go. The Apache crews that were involved that night were given the opportunity less than a week later to take the bastards out that did it. And they did it. because none of these clowns, anything that they did, they couldn't keep it a secret. So they started picking up cell phone chatter where this guy that pulled the trigger was bragging. And so they tracked this clown down, and him and 3 or 4 or 5 buddies, whatever it was. And they sent that Apache crew in, or those Apache crews in, and they dropped some Hellfire, some 7-inch rockets and whatever else, some 30 millimeter. I hope they sent it all. And once they laid waste to these scumbags, for good measure, they brought in some bombers and dropped a couple JDAMs on these assholes at the same time. So may they all rot in hell. And I'm glad that those Apache crews were able to get some revenge. Will it bring anybody back? No, it won't. But it sure as hell helps to sleep better at night.